Hello, everyone. Welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. Tonight, we're taking your questions, and we are going to talk about Matthew 24. And then another question, we're going to talk about the Great Commission. All right, how does that all fit together? Well, I'm glad you asked. You get to ask some questions. We're going to talk about Matthew 24 because that's what Jesus talked about just before he went to the cross, which is kind of interesting. And then shortly after the cross, he gave everyone the commission, the mission, right? He commissioned them to go and to spread the good news. Is there a correlation? What does that have to do with the end times? We're going to get into this. I'm excited. Of course, we have my amazing co-host Joel is with us tonight, so I'm excited about that. Scott couldn't make it. He had to take the night off, so we wish him well. But we're looking forward to getting into your questions. If you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll do our very best to get to them. All right, now, before we get started.
Quick question, Doug.
Yeah.
Asking the questions, can they hear you normally? Stereo, Doug. I'm hearing mono, Doug, and I'm not sure exactly why. So are they hearing you properly? Are you hearing me? So please tell us what's going on.
Well, I can certainly hear you, Joel. I'm not sure if anybody can hear me in stereo or not. Hopefully they can, but mono, Doug. All right, well.
Oh, it's my headphones. Okay, I'm fine. It's stereo, okay. Doug.
Someone says mono. Well, hey,
mono,
it is
Doug.
what it is at this point, so we're going to have to just live with it. All right. So now, here's a question I want to pose before we really get into this whole thing. You guys know I've been working on the Regenesis Code. All right, this is a project I've been working on for, I don't know, too long. Right? I'm starting to feel like Moses, like out in the desert, going for so long. But the reason that I started writing Regenesis Code was because I really felt that story is the way to go. All right. When Jesus was ministering, how did he most often share his message? Well, it was through parables or through story, and I think we have to come to this realization that churches, ever since the 90s, have been on the decline, and many of them are shuttering because there just are not enough people going to church like there used to be. All right. Now we can say, oh, this is terrible, and we could try to change that. Or I think we could simply pivot and just say, you know what? People are going to the movie theaters. People are changing. Their ways are changing, and it's cool because way back when you had the Roman roads, that was the form of communication. Then of course we had the printing press that changed everything. Then we had radio, TV. Now we have the internet. Things keep changing, and I think the way that we get to change, or we get to present the message of the kingdom, is ever changing. And now there's some people that say, hey, it's got to be very much on the nose. It has to be come to Jesus right now, right here. And I think that's one form. You had the Jesus film, right? Over close to 10 billion people are going to watch. We'll have seen that by 2025. That's huge, right? Then you also have The Chosen. Now, whether you like it or not, it doesn't really matter at this point, but still, it's making an impact on people hearing about the message of the kingdom. But let's be frank, a lot of people are never going to step foot in, whether it's Pure Flix, they're not going to tune into those kinds of things. They're not going to look for religious programming because that's just not their wheelhouse. So what if we had a story that had all of the big blockbuster stuff in it, but it also had a subtle presentation of the kingdom? What if we could do that? What if we could get people excited about this so that by the end of the story, they're on the edge of their seats. They're pining for the good guy to come and save the day, save us from the darkness. What if we could do that? Well, this is what Regenesis Code is all about. All right. Speaking, theological speak, it's got the Antichrist, it has aliens, it has Mark of the Beast, right? It's got all this stuff, right? It's got the epic return of Jesus, but we're not putting it in language that is very Christian. It's not biblical in its the way that it's presented or the way it sounds, right? It's presented as aliens. It's presented as genetic transformation and all this other stuff, right? It's still the same bottom line Bible stuff, but it's presented in language that someone who isn't part of Christianity, who's not reached, someone who isn't going to church, it's in language that they can appreciate. And they're like, wow, this is cool, right? And so this is why I've been working on this. And here's where I am. Okay, I've done a tremendous amount of work. All right, and my co-author Mornay Tunison out of South Africa, we've both worked hard on this. We've both invested time, money, sweat, tears. Okay, and it's been great. Okay, I'm happy to do it. but I'm at a standstill, right? I can only do so much. Now, what I'm looking for is not people to say, hey, have you considered this? Or, if you thought about doing this, something or other. What I'm really looking for is the people that have real world experience, that it was something related to the movie industry. Okay. Because sometimes, I put out these requests. They're like, hey, have you thought about contacting Angel Studios? I'm like, yeah, we've actually thought about that. Okay. But here's the deal. We need people that have real world experience, like entertainment lawyers, project managers, as it relates to making a movie or a TV series, and other people that have that kind of real world experience. Now, maybe you know somebody who knows somebody that knows Mel Gibson, or knows somebody, somebody else that might be able to help us really make this movie. Some years ago, I actually met with a producer who worked for the Weinstein Company before all the debacle happened. But I pitched it to him. He was excited about it. He's like, "Who do you want to make?" And I'm like, "Man, George Lucas would be amazing." And he's like, "Oh, I know George, and maybe he'd do that." I was so excited. I was on cloud nine. I tell you not. I tell you, it was amazing. But the guy died. He died of cancer. And well, me and God had a few exchanges about that little scenario. And well, I'm still working on it. Okay, so I'm persevering, but I need your help. I really do need your help, guys. We have, on average, about 1,500 to 2,000 people that watch this every week. Certainly, there must be somebody who knows somebody that's in the industry so that we can get this thing made. All right, here's where we are. So Mornay and I have, of course, we've written the book, which I put the link in the chat or in the description. So if you haven't listened to it yet, please listen to the book, or you can buy it on Amazon, however you want to do it, or you can listen right here on YouTube for free. But I want you to catch the vision. Okay, I need you to catch the vision with me, because once you catch it, right, then we can start working together. Look, I'm not doing it for the money, right? I need the money, but I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing this for the kingdom. I'm doing this to get the message out in a way that's going to impact people, right? And I believe in this. I really believe that we have to do it differently. Again, Pure Flix, hey, God bless them, but I don't think that's how we're going to reach people for Christ, right? Pure Flix is for people that already have come to Christ. So if we want to reach people that don't know about Jesus, we want to reach people that are just like, hey, I'm looking for a great movie. Did you ever see The Matrix? I was spellbound. I thought it was amazing, all of the effects and the story, right? But was there theology in there? Oh man, there was a ton of theology in The Matrix, right? You had Neo Anderson, right? The new man who had to save the world from this invisible, dark, sinister force that was enslaving and deceiving mankind. Does that sound familiar? I mean, and then by the third movie, there's Neo sprawled out, crucified for humanity, right? I mean, look, there was tons of theology in that movie, but it wasn't on the nose. It wasn't so much in your face. It was subtle. And again, whether you like the movie or not is beside the point. It's just that there was a lot of theology in that movie. So with Regenesis Code, what we want to do is we want to, of course, embed that theology in there. Trust me, I've done a lot of research. I've put it all in there, but we're not calling it the mark of the beast, and we're not calling him the Antichrist, and all these other things. We're going to do it in such a way that it's subtle, it's exciting. It's a great story, whether you believe in God or you don't, right? And so this is where we are. I need your help. I need you guys to, again, not just write me, Doug, have you thought about Angel Studios? Yes, we've thought about that. But I need people that can actually help move this forward, right? There's a lot I don't know about finance. There's a lot I don't know about the movie industry. There's a lot I don't know about the laws. I don't know where to get the money. Okay. All these different things. So if you know something about that, please contact me. My email is doughamp@gmail.com. Right. Everyone's free to write to me. If you want to give me a pep talk, that's fine. If you want to pray for me, please. But I need real world solutions. And if you're that person, please contact me. All right. So that's kind of my pitch. How does this fit into the end times? Well, Jesus spent a lot of time talking about the end times. And I think that he did that, well, for the people back then, certainly, but for also our generation. That's why we do this show every week, because he did take a lot of time. He wanted to give us a heads up And I think if we're going to get this message beyond the walls of conferences and just beyond the debate between dispensationalists and non-dispensationalists, pre-tribbers and non-pre-tribbers, if we're going to get this into a bigger context, we have to stop debating with one another, stop fighting about the particular details, and get the big story out in front of people, because that is what is going to make the difference. Story. Okay, story, not debate, but story is going to make the difference. And so again, that's it. I'm going to stop there. So check it out. Joel.
True. I mean, this is an interesting time frame where the silly little TikTok videos do better than, say, a big YouTube video. I've heard experts talk about it over the years, and they say if you like the content, you will binge on the content.
Yes.
You'll rent the whole thing over the weekend and binge on everything like that. But we have to get them enticed with the content in the first place. And so you can't do it the standard way, which is, Jesus this way and, whatever else. You have to appeal to them. My appeal right now is to go out to Stillwater, Minnesota, to the boom site on the nights when the auroras are beaming and just talk physics. And everybody wants to talk with the physics guy because I'm describing what's going on. And so it is bizarre. That's not how my father would have preached the gospel, but I'm having fun. And we're talking about signs and things like that. And they're actually a part of Matthew 24, also more Luke 21. But anyway, the main thing is the standard way of reaching people isn't working anymore. Churchianity isn't working anymore. People aren't as churched as they used to be. People kind of need to grab their attention. And so you're going that direction, which is kind of what I'm doing too.
Yeah, and my vision is going to take thousands of people. If you ever look at the credits at the end of a movie, it takes thousands of people to make this happen. And I really believe that if we as the Christian community could stop fighting with one another and unite around a story, right? Again, if you've read the story, you know that it's well researched, you know that it's very much grounded in the scriptures, but it's not in your face kind of stuff. I mean, I guess a tiny little critique I might have of Left Behind, which was majorly successful, but it was all kind of for Christians, right? It was like, you got left behind, and basically in the first 10 minutes, Kirk Cameron's given his life to Jesus, and that's fine. Hey, it worked for that. That was over 20 years ago. Maybe we have a new way to do it. Maybe
the Passion worked too. It's interesting. Mel Gibson's The Passion, it really did well. And it was, I don't know, it was a different way of telling it. It was a gory version, but it did work.
That's right. Yeah. So I think we just need to be willing to, take whatever roads we have available to us and just run with those, and so it's not to put anything down, but it's just to say, hey, there's all different kinds of ways to do it. I actually looked into how much a average Billy Graham crusade cost. I was kind of shocked. It was $2.3 million to put on a Billy Graham crusade. I mean, that was a lot of money, but why did people do that? Well, they believed that by donating, by putting in time, by volunteering, all the coordination and a lot of talent that it took to make that happen, that they were actually building something for the kingdom. And it took a lot of people. It wasn't only Billy Graham that was doing it, right? He got to be the centerpiece, but there were all these other people that were involved in making that happen. And, say what you will about them, a lot of people did come to faith in him, in God, of course. And they reached thousands. I think we could reach hundreds of millions of people if we had something that was well produced. Yeah, that's binge worthy. I think we could reach people, and we could actually impact their worldview, and we could even potentially change the culture. I get kind of excited about that, because there's still movies that I quote from. It's been 20 plus years, and I'm still quoting from those movies because they made such an impact on me. And I think this is a place where we have an opportunity to do that, but it would require us to all come together, to work together on a common goal here. So I'm pretty excited about it. I hope people will.
Doug, you're doing some video shorts and things like that already, right? Are you doing any TikToks or just YouTube shorts?
Yeah, I'm not doing TikTok. I'm probably too old. I haven't figured out how to do TikTok yet, but I mean, I know it's not complicated. I just haven't ventured over there.
I'm thinking maybe when I'm out checking out auroras, I might want to record TikToks off my
Mhm.
cell phone and just show them what I'm seeing, and then describe the physics and how it. I never talk about the Bible directly. I just talk about the physics that sounds like the Bible. So we'll see. But yeah, I see
Awesome.
where you're going.
Awesome.
You have to get their attention.
Yep, indeed. Well, hey, let's now jump into Matthew 24. I know you had something you wanted to share, so
Why don't
let's
you share yours first because you're probably more prepped than I am. So, uh, yeah,
well, I just had Matthew 24 pulled up. I thought we could
okay.
just kind of go through it, somewhat verse by verse. We won't belabor every verse, of course, but you know, this is where, again, this is only days before Jesus' crucifixion, and he takes his disciples out to the Mount of Olives. Now we know that it's going to be at the base of the Mount of Olives, uh,
Okay,
the
people,
night Jesus is
comment. Is
betrayed, where
Doug
he's going to
cutting in and
be in the
out?
Garden of Gethsemane,
Doug,
right?
Doug, can you hear me? Okay, so Doug, you're cutting in and out real bad. Your mic is choppy. And so, people, is that actually the case, or is that just me? Because I have a thunderstorm here, and it could be tornadoes.
It's so weird. Ah, okay.
Yes, Doug, you're
It's
cutting
weird.
out,
Everything else
Doug.
used to work great, man. Okay. Well,
Get used to it. It's live, people.
oh, the joy. All
Okay,
right.
so
Well,
try
in
it
any
again,
event,
Doug.
all right. So, yeah. So the Mount of Olives is where Jesus takes his disciples. He starts talking about what is going on. Um, what's going to happen in the future. They ask him, like, Lord, what will be the sign of the end of the age? Okay. And of course, you're coming. Right. And so he says, starts telling them all these different things. Why the Mount of Olives? Why is that so significant? Remember back in Zechariah 14, it says that the Lord, Yehovah, Yud He Vav He, that he is going to come back and that his feet are going to stand on the Mount of Olives and it's going to split in two. All right. So the Mount of Olives is where Jesus went when he was betrayed. He was in the Garden of Gethsemane. That's at the base of the Mount of Olives. He's going to return at the top of the Mount of Olives. So it makes perfect sense that he would take his disciples to the Mount of Olives so he could give some explanation as to what is going on. Now, I don't know why it seems when I go to my app,
All right. So
go
while
to the
you're having
Bible. Yeah,
problems with that, I'll jump in real quick. So
please.
basically, Zechariah 14 lays out the situation where Yeshua is going to land. His feet are going to split the Mount of Olives. Water is going to gush out of him, which is a sign from John 7:37. It's basically that Sukkot, the Hoshana Rabbah of Sukkot, which is the last great day. And so it's all these wonderful pictures are going on. And so that's why it needed to occur there, because that's where everybody's buried. They know Yeshua. Well, we'll just call it Yeshua,
Mhm.
that Jesus is returning to the Mount of
Right.
Olives. So why not describe where he's returning to? And, it overlooks the temple. And so, okay. Are you ready to go? Is everything
Yeah.
working now, Doug? Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't know why my microphone seems to be cutting out when I go to a different app, so it's kind of weird. But hey, it is what it is, right? So we'll just have to endure. But he talks about how the kingdom in verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. All right, so that's one reason I'm excited to get the message out about through the book of Regenesis Code. I think that's quite exciting. Then in verse 15, right, he says, when you see the abomination standing in the holy place, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, watch out. Okay, so the abomination of desolation. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house, and let him who is in the field not to go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. All right. So then there's going to be great tribulation. Now, it's interesting for our pre-trib brothers, right? They say that all the babies are going to be taken out during the rapture, and yet here we see that women are pregnant, and that So, certainly something is going on just before this whole thing gets started. But then comes the abomination of desolation, as spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Now, Daniel, of course, did speak about that. And he spoke about Antiochus the Fourth, or Antiochus Epiphanes, who would come and would desecrate the temple. Now, we know what happened in about 163 BC. You had Antiochus Epiphanes. He came into Jerusalem. He took a pig and he slaughtered it in the holy place, and he desecrated the temple. What does it mean to desecrate? Well, it meant that it was unsacred, all right? It was unholy. He did something that made it no longer set apart, all right? No different than if you were to go into an operating room and you were to, take a bunch of unclean things and just spread them all around. Well, that would no longer be fit to have operations there until you cleaned it up, right? And then once it's all done, then it's ready to go again. So that's essentially what happened. So something is going to happen in that holy place. Of course, this suggests very strongly that there will either be a temple, or there could be a tabernacle, or, as we've talked about on this show, there could just be some kind of holy place. Okay, it may just be a very simple altar, could be a very simple tent. All right, so we're not trying to necessarily predict what the structure is going to be, other than there will be a place that is identified as the holy place, and people will know that it's the holy place, and the Antichrist or the beast is going to go into that place. Now, Paul tells us that he is going to go in, he's going to declare himself to be God, and he's going to show himself to be God. And I think that is really...
I think where you're going is proper, Doug, because it's like the declaration, I am God, the signs that will accompany. So from 2 Thessalonians 2, 6, I think it is, he'll have the big three are dunamis, so it's like dynamite, and then semeion, signs of some nature, and the teros, which would be earthborn type signs, things like that. So the false prophet will be calling attention to him, and there's something in that declaration that will be monumental within the world, and that seems to be the abomination of desolation.
Yeah, well, what I suggest in Regenesis Code, I don't want to give all the spoilers, of course, but you guys know the basic scenario, right? You've certainly read the Bible, of course, and if you've read Corrupting the Image, I'll say what I did in Corrupting the Image. I won't give it away for Regenesis Code, but what I suggest in Corrupting the Image, volumes 1, 2, and 3, especially number 3, I suggest that the Antichrist, the beast, is going to fuse with Satan. Right now, this is where it gets really exciting. All right, so again, maybe I'm totally wrong, but I don't think I am. But maybe I'm totally wrong, or maybe I'm onto something, right? And for me, the journey started back in Genesis 3:15, right, when God says to the serpent, he says, because you've done this, right, there will be enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. And when I really fixed in on your seed, I'm like, wait, what? Huh? What do you mean your seed? I get the woman's seed, that's going to be Jesus, but your seed? How can that be? Right. And that set me on this incredible journey to try to understand that. And then fast forward some years, I was looking at Ezekiel 38:39, and I'm looking at where God says to Gog, he says, are you not he of whom I spoke by all my prophets through all those years? And there I am scratching my head. I'm like, wait a second. Where did God ever speak about Gog? Nowhere besides the book of Ezekiel. So then I did a deep dive into this word Gog. A lot of people have been trying to figure it out, but it's not a Hebrew word, right? So long story short, it's not a Hebrew word. Turns out I found it in Sumerian. That's probably the oldest language, at least certainly the oldest written language that we have. And it means death and enmity in that language. And I'm like, this is kind of interesting, right? This is really amazing. It's related to the word ug or og, which also means death or enmity. So Gug or Gog is the reduplication of the word og or ug. which means death or enmity. And so I was picking up these breadcrumbs. I'm like, this is really amazing stuff. So what I think the Antichrist is going to do is he's going to fuse with Satan. He's going to become a living hybrid between him and Satan. And then he's going to go into the holy place and he's going to declare himself to be God and show himself to be God, because he will have God-like powers, right? Now, this is people say, well, I think only God can do X, Y, and Z. Well, no, Satan has a lot of power. Remember what he was able to do to Job? He was able to blow down the kid's house. That's kind of a big deal. He's able to call down fire from heaven. There's a lot of things that Satan can do. And of course, he was able to afflict Job in his body. So tons of stuff that he's able to do. I would even argue that when Jesus rebuked the wind and the waves as they were going to Gadaris, that he was actually rebuking Satan.
Yes.
That's my hunch, is that because, here he is going to this place called Fortress, and, Fortress for who? Well, I would argue by the virtue of the one that he met there, Mr. Legion, right, that Satan was kind of freaking out. Remember, Jesus was in Satan's playground at that time, right? What was that whole area called? It was called the land of Bashan. And who was the king there? Well, this guy named Og, right? Og of Bashan, right? I trace that back to Sumerian. It means death or enmity. You do this in the reduplication thing, and it comes out as Gog. I was like, oh my goodness, this is insane, right? You just start piecing all these things together, and you come up with this composite picture that really shows you how this story has been going on throughout the Bible since pretty much Adam and Eve. So, and certainly even possibly, well, of course, before that as well. But, since the beginning. So Matthew 24, right? We're given this warning. Jesus gives us this warning of what is to come, that there will be an abomination of desolation. When that happens, get out of Jerusalem. It's going to get ugly. What are your thoughts there, Joel?
Okay, I'd like to show a question, and then I'll pop up my screen, and I'll kind of take us through some of the things. So, Katharina, do you think there are parallels between the Olivet Discourse, which is Matthew 24 generally, and Revelation 6? And I would say yes. And so I'll pop up my screen real quick here, add the stage. And so let me just make sure that I'm clicking along here. Get my mouse where it's supposed to be. Basically, what I'm arguing is, sorry, guys, there we go. Okay, so now I should be fine. So basically, what I'm arguing is that Matthew 24 goes through the points, the key points. So it will be raised up for ethnos, epi, ethnos, which I would argue is ethnic groups. And we're seeing a lot of that right now. And it kind of sounds like the first seal in some ways. Okay. Kingdom versus kingdom is basileia, epi, basileia. And you can see that down below. So that's very similar to the second seal. The second seal is more like snatching peace from the earth, but you've got this kingdom issue going on there. It could be war. It could be what we're experiencing right now, which is, small skirmishes worldwide. The third seal, there will be, it's presenting well enough. Thanks, Doug. So basically, you've got famines, limo, and depending upon the Matthew 24 version that you have there, it could be loimo too. And Doug tends to show that in the Greek. So it would be famines and plagues and things like that. That's kind of like the third seal. Some of those plagues might be the fourth seal. And so I'll argue in this case that loimo would be probably plagues, the fourth seal. Okay. Then the sixth, well, let's go fifth, down below, way down below. Fifth seal seems to be 24 verse 9, which is they will condemn you to death. So Doug, help me with this, apotegnu, right? And that is death, standard Greek word for death. And it's used second person pronoun. So we know they're coming for us sooner or later, the believers. So then the sixth seal, now we're moving back up to the right-hand side again, the quakes, the seismo. And so he's really hitting on the seals. So they're very similar back and forth. And now the weird thing is, with all the aurora activity and all the solar activity, we're not experiencing quakes yet. I don't understand why, because you should see more of that. As the electricity drives in, we're not going to go flat Earth tonight. We're going to go with poles, and the energy goes in through the poles, and I can see it coming out through the auroras, and I can also see then it's moving the fissures of the Earth. And so right now it's just moving them. It's not anything big, but the bottom line is that it's setting up for something at some point in time. So yes, I see the comparison. So let's grab Katharina again. Well, I don't feel like going back down to the screen right now. I have to fight with my mouse, guys. Sorry. So the main thing is that she's right. There are parallels between the Olivet Discourse and Revelation 6. So
Yeah.
I'll just kind of go
Yeah,
along here.
and I would just add to that that I think that what we have in what Jesus is giving us, the big overview
Yep.
scenario, and I've written on Revelation. I struggled with Revelation for a long time. Of course, I was a pre-tripper, so I was
That's a
taught to
struggle
read it.
right there.
I know. I'm a recovering
It's just,
pre-tripper, basically, a
it
recovering
twists your
dispensational.
brain.
Well, people don't always understand what dispensationalism is all about, but basically, there are 7 distinct dispensations of time, or 7 different epochs of time, and God sort of changes his modus operandus every time there's a new dispensation. I would argue that's more or less false. I don't think God really changes. I think we have an unfolding of the story, but I don't think he's really changing his basic plan. So in Revelation, what I was taught is that you first have the 6 seals, and then come the 7 trumpets, and then come the 7 bowls. Having gone back, having spent a lot of time looking at this, I really think that we have more of an umbrella situation, or a Russian nesting doll situation, where you have one inside of the other. All right. So I would say that Revelation 6 is basically your executive summary. And then the trumpets and the bowls essentially fit within the context of that executive summary. So when you get to the 4th horseman, for example, it says death and Hades, right? So death and Hades are the same as death and Sheol. They're exactly the same. And it says that they will be given authority over 1/4 of the earth. Now, again, the way I was taught that is that they're going to kill 1/4 of humanity. That's what I was taught. But as I went back and I looked at it in the Greek, it says that they're going to have authority, exousia, epites geis, over the earth. And I was like, oh my goodness, right? It's over 1/4 of the earth. Okay. So I was curious, and I'm like, could it be, like how much of Earth's surface do we actually live on? It turns out there was a study done in 1999. Mankind lives on 25.4% of the Earth's surface. I'm like, no way. That's just amazing. So it's not so much that death and Hades are going to kill 1/4 of humanity, but they're going to have authority over 1/4 of the Earth's surface area, which is where people live. In other words, they're going to have authority over all humanity. And that's what we see in Revelation 13, where it says that he had authority over every tribe, tongue, nation, and language. All right. So he's going to have authority over everybody. All right. And again, when you begin to see these things as executive summaries, then it makes so much more sense. And they don't always have to be in a strict chronological order. In fact, I would argue that they're not in many cases. Sometimes there's a general chronology, but not a strict chronology. And if you allow that, what's happening then in the trumpets is sometimes just kind of let's go back and let's look at this theme again. All right. So think about it. In the 6th seal, what is happening there? Well, that is when the heavens are going to recede like a scroll. And this is all the kings and the mighty men and all the free and the slave are going to go hide themselves in the caves of the rocks, caves and under the rocks, and say, hide us from the wrath of the Lamb. So they realize, because they say the day of his wrath has come. So they're like, this is it. They realize suddenly who Yeshua is, and they're not excited about it. All right. So that is the return of Christ right there in the sixth seal. You have the same thing happening in the sixth bowl, right? You have an earthquake that's bigger than anything we've ever seen. But we just had an earthquake that was bigger than anybody's ever seen, right? In the sixth seal, massive, gigantic, the mountains and the islands are moving out of their place. In the sixth bowl, the mountains and the islands are moving out of their place. It's the same exact event. And that's what Jesus was talking about, right? So he's giving this basic scenario, but each author, whether it's Jesus or John, they're giving different vantage points, kind of like taking a camera around. You're like, I'm going to get it from this angle. I'm going to get it from this angle, maybe from up top, down below, right? Each angle helps you have a different perspective of what this whole thing looks like, right? So that, I would argue, is what we have in the book of Revelation, and Revelation 6 is essentially an executive summary of those events. And then Jesus giving what he does in Matthew 24 is also, giving his perspective as it relates to the disciples and, of course, his return.
Okay.
All right.
So
yes.
basically,
Let
me take that back. Okay, there you go. So basically, this is done by somebody else. They might be a dispensationalist. I don't know. But this person put this together, and I found it, and I'm posting it. And they're saying Matthew chapter 24, kind of verses 1 through 3 sound like the book of Revelation, chapters 1 through 5. Then chapter 24 again of Matthew, verses 4 to 14, the signs, the symbols, things like that. Chapters 6 through 9. Interesting. Okay, so 6 would be, again, most of the seals. 8 would conclude the seventh seal. Then you've got the trumpets up through 9. The trumpets start in 8 and then go through, most of them are done by 9. So anyway, then 15 to 28, which Doug was talking about, the abomination, things like that, that would be, they're claiming 10 to 14. Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. And then verses 29 to 31, his return, chapters 15 through 20. Interesting. Okay. Return of Jesus and the effects. And then 32 to 51 sound like 21 and 22 personal appeals to follow God. Not bad. I don't know if I totally agree with them, but it's worth thinking about. There are some comparisons. Doug?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I mean, I probably wouldn't agree with the book of Revelation sort of being laid out that way. Because again, I would argue that chapter 6, Revelation, is the sixth seal in chapter 6 is the return of Christ. All right. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, I can't show you guys my software because then it gets all choppy. But again, I don't know. There's some gremlin in my computer. But look, so in Matthew 24, I'm just going to read it here from my good old trusty phone. So Jesus talks about, he says, for then, verse 21, for then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. Or did you? Oh, I'm sorry, you had that up there.
Yeah, I had Matthew 24 up, but I don't have it as far. You're way out there, but that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually am way out there in many things in life.
Okay.
And it says, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it, for false Christ will come, etc., etc. All right, so then he talks about, for as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Well, the eagles, right? This is the Greek word atos. It could also be translated as vultures. Now, what is going to happen at the return of Christ? Well, shortly thereafter, there's going to be this great supper of the Lord, okay? And this is where he's going to call all the birds of heaven. And he's going to say, hey, come on, guys, there's going to be this great dinner that I want to treat you to. And who will they be eating? Well, sadly, they'll be eating all the bad guys on planet Earth that were trying to fight against Jesus. So he talks about this, all right? And so then he says, now, immediately after the tribulation of those days. Now, this is where I would say, let's put a colon after the words tribulation of those days. The colon meaning that he's now going to describe what the tribulation of those days looks like. Okay. So now you might say, well, Doug, who are you to put a colon in the Bible? Well, here's the reality. There was no punctuation in the ancient Greek manuscripts. Okay, so all the punctuation we have is based on someone's best educated opinion or guess, if you will. And I'm not that I'm disagreeing with them in many cases, but this is where I would say if we put a colon right after the tribulation of those days, and then it says, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven. He's explaining some of the key features of the tribulation of those days. So it's not that the sun, moon, and stars are darkened after the tribulation, but they're going to be darkened during the great tribulation. And when you start comparing this with the book of Revelation, let's think about it. Revelation chapters 8 and 9. What happens in chapter 8? Well, these are the trumpet judgments, of course, and we have this great star falling from heaven to earth, and then it falls into the rivers and the lakes, and they become bitter, they become wormwood, right? And then in chapter 9, John says, and I saw a star having fallen from heaven. Where did the star come from? It's already fallen to the earth. Where did it fall? Back in chapter 8, of course, right? So who is that star? Well, if we go to chapter 12, we know that there's a great dragon in the heavens, and with his tail, he takes a third of the what? A third of the stars, okay? Third of the stars, right? And he casts them to the earth. And then just a little bit below that, in the same chapter, Satan and his angels are cast to the earth, right? So the great star is none other than Satan. And that was one of the epithets for Enlil, for Gog, right? I won't get into all of that stuff, but that was one of his epithets. It was that he was the great star. This is also in reference to Nimrod, who was the son of Enlil. Again, I've talked about who Enlil is, basically Satan, right? For brevity's sake, but that he was also known as the star. Satan or Enlil was known as the dog star or Sirius, right? There's all these references to a star, to the great star, which is none other than Satan. So the star that says, I saw a star having fallen, John is seeing Satan. And then it says that he was given the key to the abyss, right? So then he opens it up. And what comes out of the abyss? All this smoke like out of a great furnace. And it says so much smoke that it began to do what? It began to cover the sun, the moon, and the stars. Now, if you've ever seen the moon through the smoke of a forest fire, do you know what it looks like? It looks blood red. That's so crazy about it. It looks blood red. All right. So it's the smoke that's coming up out of the abyss, this great furnace, right? It's going to come up and it's going to begin to cloud it. Now, it doesn't just happen like that, right? It doesn't just like suddenly cover the whole sky. If you think about the smoke from a chimney, what does it do? Well, it starts coming up and it keeps coming up, right? The longer a forest fire goes on, the more the sky gets covered with smoke, right? And that's what's going to happen in the tribulation. It's going to start, and then the Bible talks about it, how a third of the sun, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were covered. Well, why a third? Because again, it's a gradual process until finally it goes from being a third to finally 100%. And that's what we're going to have. So we have to put this kind of boots on the ground and start beginning to see how this is all beginning to pass, and that, that it's starting to happen. And, and so then we can really understand. So Jesus is just giving a summary statement in Matthew 24 of what the tribulation is going to look like, right? So all these things will happen. The sun will be darkened. The moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven. Now, the stars falling from heaven, where do we see that? Well, we see that in Revelation chapter 12, right? That the dragon takes a third of the stars and he casts them to the earth. Same chapter, Michael and Satan are fighting, and then Satan and his angels are cast to the earth, right? So that is where they're going to be cast to the earth. Right. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear, which I think is just basically Jesus coming back. They're going to mourn because here he comes, and then he's going to go and gather his people. Right. And so now the gathering of his people is in conjunction with the resurrection. So again, Jesus is just giving a very brief summary statement. He tells you all kinds of things that are going to happen before it really gets going, and then he gives you just a couple verses as to what is really happening during the tribulation itself. All right, you had more thoughts.
I kind of do. I'm seeing a lot of questions. Well, let's go
Nice.
ahead and just cover this real quick. So basically, I'm the SEALs guy. You can tell already that Doug and I completely disagree on the SEALs. He's partially correct in terms of, I read the Torah this way, where things move forward. Say, okay, let's do this. Leviticus 10 and then Leviticus 16. So we have the two boys dying, Aaron's sons, and Nadab and Abihu. And then in 16, we say after the death of, well, what happened in the 5 chapters in between? Well, obviously, God is telling some other stories, talking about other things, and then he jumps back into the narrative. So I would argue that Revelation reads the same way. And John's a Torah guy, okay? So he's going to write it like the Torah is, which is some semblance of moving forward with the storyline. Then here's the backstory. So I'll do a narrative break. And so I see that, and it works. It reads like Torah. And Daniel would be maybe the same way too, because he's a Torah guy too, and they're both in diaspora, which is interesting to link the two together. They're both realizing I am unclean. So the words in the Hebrew are tameh and tahor. Tahor is clean. Tameh is unclean. Both of them they couldn't go back for their 3 festivals per year, and they were miserable. I mean, they want to be clean and they want to worship in the temple. That isn't happening, with Daniel. Well, no, Daniel did probably early in his life, but then at the end, no, not a chance. So, and who knows if he ever went back? He was very old by the time the 70 years were over. So, bottom line is, I would argue that we will see these seals open, or at least the birth pangs of them. So, Doug, if you could pop me back up again. Well, actually, I think I can do it myself here. Okay, there. Whoop, there you go. Let's both click. Okay, so basically, the odd thing is, even Haller agrees with me on this, and this is from Wiki, that there's a silence, there's an expectancy, and people, you're probably sensing it right now, that there's going to come judgment at the end times, and the prayers of the Christians will be martyred by the Antichrist. Well, they'll be martyred in general. The Antichrist may not kill anybody himself. He may just allow other people to do so. Then you've got the trumpet and the bowl judgments and things like that. So this is odd to have Wiki agree with me. The main thing is, I argue that the white horse is overcoming the West based on Zechariah 6 directions. So when you see Nikeo in the Greek, don't read it like your translation says, which is the Antichrist and he's conquering. And no, this is very passive. This is overcoming. And the West is killing itself off. If you look across the world right now, the West is doing their best. They won't birth babies. They won't really raise their babies. And they're allowing other people to come in at will and do some horrible things. Doug, have fun
Why
with
do you
Denver.
think that? Well, so I mean, I guess I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because the
Yeah,
word
okay, sure.
Nikeo, it's victory, to overcome. I mean, we see this very clearly in Daniel, where he talks about the beast is going to have authority. He's going to overcome the saints, right? It's very clear. It's the same language, actually.
But it's not
Uh,
conquer, Doug. That's the word that's used. In every other case, Nikeo is overcome. Then in Revelation 6:1 or 2, they want it to suddenly be conquering. It's the
well,
Antichrist.
yeah, I mean, conquer, victor, right? I mean, this is where we get Nike shoes, right? You got the goddess
Oh, yeah, it's a
Nike,
goddess.
right?
Yeah,
Well, but it's the goddess of victory, right?
right.
So, what does a victor do? They conquer, they overcome, they defeat. I think these are synonyms. I mean, I guess I wouldn't really split hairs on exactly which one of those
It ain't going to be the Antichrist. Seal 1 is not the Antichrist.
Yeah, well, see, I strongly disagree with you, because again, I
Oh,
think
wow.
I,
Okay.
I think when you start looking at what I've been talking about with Gog, and then you begin to understand who Enlil and Ninurta were and what their images are, and I've put up the pictures like 1,000 times as to show what he actually looked like. Right, he was a centaur carrying a bow. Right, and of course, the centaur has a man's torso, a horse's body. I mean, I think it's a dead match, so I just don't know why that is such a big deal. I feel like a lot of people have a very ethnocentric type of eschatology. America's this, America's that. I mean, certainly we're a big country. We're the superpower at the moment, but things can change. We assume that it's all about America, but I just don't know that that's necessarily the case. I mean, just because I'm not a dispensationalist, I don't throw out all of the potential scenarios that they have looked at, because I think some of them are biblical. I think some maybe are a little bit wanting, but I think the white horse, I think that is the Antichrist, and or beast, whatever you want to call him. And again, I don't see these necessarily having to be sequential. Doesn't mean first this one, then that one, but these are general scenarios that are going to be happening. And I even argue that the four horsemen essentially cover the they pretty much cover all of the events of the tribulation. All right. And then the fifth seal, there's nothing really happening in the fifth seal. It's more of a,
Well, it's
hey,
death.
how are
I
we
mean, it's
doing?
martyrdom.
Well, it's more of a state of where people are, right? There's no real action happening there, but it's like kind of a behind the scenes. It's a flashback in the movie, like, oh, by the way, here's what's happening on the other side of this whole thing, right? And so you have this other camera angle now looking up into the heavenlies, saying, and people are like, okay, we died, now what? How much longer? He's like, just a little bit here, and then we flash back to the earth, and then the heavens recede like a scroll. That is the second coming. All right. So again, Revelation 6 is your executive summary, which is essentially what Jesus was giving, a very abbreviated executive summary of the big events. I mean, Jesus really did not go into that much detail. He told us something about the abomination of desolation. He said then that you better hightail it out of there. And then, the tribulation that's going to be worse than anything else is going to include these things: the sun, going dark, the moon going dark, the sun, the stars going dark, right? And that's pretty much it. He didn't really tell us a whole lot more in that, really, in Matthew 24. So, again, I disagree with you, and that's okay.
But I'll cite Zechariah 6, where those same color horses go out, and the directions are listed there. And the main thing is the horse colors match so closely with the Greek, the Septuagint versus the Greek in Revelation 6. So the main thing is those are four spirits of God being sent out, which is more like what you're seeing in Revelation chapter 6. You're not seeing the Antichrist, Doug. And also, what kills your theory is in the second seal, as you see the word allos there in the Greek, that means another. It's just another horse. It's not, one is not greater than the other than maybe the fourth horse is named. But when you realize that they're the same type of a spirit, it's just another spirit coming out, you know? So bottom line is,
yeah, I don't think it kills my theory at all. I mean, that's fine
I
if you
think
think
it
so,
absolutely
but
destroys it, because
I
Zechariah
strongly
6.
disagree.
Oh, I know you
Yeah,
do. But we
yeah,
disagree on the seals in general, because I'm
right.
citing physics on the sixth seal, and you're citing something about Jesus returning. And I'm saying the windows of heaven are already open. They've been opening since 1859 to right now. They've already opened by 10% through the year 2000. They opened,
What
and
happened in
this is
1859?
the Carrington event occurred, and we started to really realize this was important. The Carrington event was when the sun erupted a huge CME, probably an X40, maybe an X80, and it blew up
Okay.
the telegraph lines. It burned
Okay.
people's hands. So
Why do you call that the opening of the windows of heaven, though?
because then we started to monitor what our magnetosphere is like, because we realized this is important to us. And so,
But when we see the heavens open in the scriptures, that's when you can see through the veil to the spiritual realm, right?
no, that's when things start coming through and hitting us, because that's basically
No,
chapter 8.
no, I disagree with that. I think you're absolutely wrong. I think you're wrong biblically. I don't think you should even bring in science at this point. I mean, so Ezekiel sitting by the river Chebar, right?
Yep.
The heavens were opened. Jesus at his baptism, the heavens were opened. Stephen being stoned, the heavens were opened.
But
Revelation 19.
meteorites weren't coming through. And that's what you're
Exactly.
seeing.
I agree with you. No, nothing was coming through. No, other than the dove, but otherwise they could see through the veil to the spiritual realm. That's what it means for the heavens to open up. It has nothing to do with the Carrington event or big rocks flying to earth. That has nothing to do with it. So that's where I think you're absolutely wrong, because I think you
We'll
are
see.
drawing.
The cool
Well,
thing
I know
is,
we're all going to
people,
see,
you're going
right?
to see,
We're all going
you're
to see.
going to see either Doug's right or I'm right. And you're
Right,
going to
exactly.
literally see it. And it'll be fun to watch your eyes when you get big, when you realize, if I'm right, that literally, in my case, you will see
None of us will
the
care by then. That's the
oh,
problem.
no,
No
they'll
one
care.
will
They'll
care.
care. If the
Right.
moon is the whole moon, it's Olo in the Greek, goes blood red, which we know the dates. We have 9 of them coming up over the next 9 years.
No,
And 3 of
no,
them,
no, no, no. Those have nothing to do with that. The blood red moons, as put out by what's his name,
Mark Belts, my
Bill.
friend.
Yeah, well, hey, God bless the guy, but I think he was totally wrong,
Oh,
right? I mean, I
totally
saw the
right.
whole thing in 2014 and 2015. It was a big nothing burger. All right, now I've also seen the
Huge.
moon. No, it was nothing, man. I've seen the moon through the smoke of a forest fire. Now that is when it was blood red. All right, that's when
Yeah,
it's
I've seen
blood
that
red.
for years too. Yeah, I've seen
Okay,
that.
and that's how it's going to go up to a third. How would you explain it then? How would you explain it's going to go from a
Dust,
third? Then we
dust.
can't even see it.
I can prove to you in physics that there is a cosmic dust sheet coming through. It's like a Swiffer effect, and it's literally coming through. It's starting to hit
But,
Pluto and some of the
but we're
outer planets, and it will
yeah.
occlude the moon and the sun, believe it or not, because in chapter 6, it's actually physics, verses 12 through
But in
17.
chapter 9, it's physics too. You have the abyss opening up.
Yeah, that's
Smoke
physics
comes out
too.
like out of a great furnace. I mean, that's the simplest. That's Occam's razor. It's the simplest explanation. We don't have to go looking for anything else. It's right there in the text.
But you're going to see it, Doug. You're going to see this galactic current sheet come through and occlude planets and the sun with dust. It's starting to happen. You can't deny it because it's occurring, and science is proving it every day. There are new reports about this current sheet coming through, and it explains how you get through chapter 6 with the occlusion. Now, John is really cool there. What he says is it trichonos sakos, so it's sackcloth, but it's not a fully coated moon or sun in this case. It's going to be trichonos is like mohair, and so John got the physics of this right. It's a partial occlusion of the sun, and then it kicks off the CME, and
Have
we're
you ever
already
seen the moon?
underground.
You ever seen the moon through big smoke, like
Oh
a whole
yeah,
bunch of smoke?
absolutely. I've been watching it for 20 years,
And
looking
what
at that.
color is it? What color is it?
It's orangish. It's not quite red.
Uh, I don't
It's
know. Well, the ones
real
I've seen,
close to
maybe you
my
didn't see
shirt.
enough. Maybe there wasn't enough smoke when you were looking at it, but it was blood red. All right. And you're going to have so much smoke coming out of the abyss that it's going to continue to fill the earth until you can't even see the sun, or the sun is very much muted, and then you have the moon blood red, and then the stars, you won't even see them. So again, I think the solution is right there, but that's okay. We disagree.
Well,
It's
you
all
know
good.
what, people? You listen to his side, you listen to my side, and look at the skies. All the auroras are signs that I'm winning on the physics debate.
Well, I'll have to disagree,
Okay,
but
the auroras are low level, guys. I'm watching them in Minnesota constantly now over the last year and a half. That's never happened in the history of the world.
I grew
Well,
up in
other than
Michigan, and we saw the auroras all the time. I didn't think
we're
it was
in Michigan. No, you were
northern
southern
Michigan.
Michigan.
No, I was northern. I was right up here.
Oh, you were.
Yeah, so
I
I saw
thought you
them
were
all the
down
time.
Battle Creek. You're
Well,
not a Battle.
I was born in Battle Creek. Yes, I was
Oh,
born in
that's
Battle
why.
Creek, but
Okay, okay,
I
because
grew
you're
up
not
in
going to
northern
see
Michigan.
anything in Battle Creek.
I grew up in Petoskey. Yeah, so I saw the Northern Lights on many occasions. They're beautiful. But
I'm seeing vibrant northern lights in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Never before,
well,
other
in
than
your lifetime.
1869, but I wasn't, or 1859. I wasn't born, obviously.
So what do those prove again?
They prove that the magnetosphere is thinning, that literally the windows of heaven are opening. This is Isaiah 24. It's also Revelation 6.
You're
That the
saying the
wind,
windows of heaven are the magnetosphere.
yep, absolutely. And we can cite now for sure that it's over 15% and possibly 25% because they no longer report.
So when the flood happened and the windows of heaven opened, that was a magnetosphere thinning?
This is this situation, Isaiah 24 and Revelation 6. The flood, yeah, I mean, because the water was up above and down below, I don't know exactly how I would make
But the
that work.
magnetosphere wouldn't stop water, would it?
Things bounce off. You'd be amazed.
I think there's some windows in your theory, honestly.
We'll see. I mean, obviously,
All
you're
right.
testing with Bible verses that I haven't looked at in the Hebrew.
Well, hey, so we got some questions.
Yeah, let's hit some questions.
Yeah, yeah. This is kind of a comment. This is in relation to, my vision
Oh,
says that the movie industry has been owned. Let's see, these guys are owned by the Illuminati. That's another comment he had up there. But you know what? Look, I know there's obviously some very dark players out there, but we serve a God who's bigger, brighter, and if he wants to use uh, the devil's playground to do his work, well, who are we to stand in his way? He used Nebuchadnezzar, not exactly a Christian, not exactly a God-fearer when he started out, to do his work, and by the end of it, he'd become a true believer, right? So I don't think it's impossible for God to use the movie industry, right? It's going to take a lot of work, right? Obviously, we'll have some setbacks, we'll have some challenges, but again, I think we can absolutely get there. Now, here's one, Bert de Vries. Another hidden code in the Bible is Matthew 24:10. Matthew 24 equals 24 equals 2024. Verse 10 is the 10th month. October 2024 is rapture. Well, the good news, Bert, is that we don't have to wait very long to test your theory. I
true.
predict you're going to be absolutely wrong. We had a guest on last week, and I disagreed with him as well. He thinks that so we're going to have some nuclear event here in the United States this year. I disagree with that. Frankly, I think we're going to get to January 1st, 2025 unscathed, and life will go on as usual. So that is my prediction, and you can hold me to that one. If I'm wrong, well, then you can tell
I'm
me I was wrong
hearing
all the way up. Okay. All
I'm
right.
hearing rumblings that somebody wants to do something to destroy our election integrity in October. And so I had thought that they would hold off until after the election, but we're hearing rumblings that they're going to do their their stuff, you know, before the election. So we'll see.
That sounds like a bunch of nonsense, honestly.
Okay.
All right. John says, how is the abomination and desolation not the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, which left Jerusalem and the temple desolate? Great question, John. Because Jesus specifically said, as spoken of by Daniel the prophet. All right. So when the Romans came in, they did not try to destroy the temple. They did not go in and desecrate the temple, right? They did not sacrifice anything in the holy place. They never went in and said, "Hey, I'm God," and then they to show themselves to be God. They didn't do that. Certainly, the temple was destroyed. The Romans did not try to destroy it, at least according to Josephus. It certainly was destroyed, but that was not their intent. So I think that's important to just make that distinction. Um, also, we're kind of at a loss if Jesus talks about the tribulation that's going to be worse than anything the world has ever seen or will ever see. Now, look, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 7 AD was horrific. A lot of people died. It's very sad. It's tragic and all that. But was it the worst thing that ever happened in human history? I don't know. I mean, it just seems like a far cry from saying it was the worst thing ever. I think that the Holocaust, that might have been the worst thing that ever happened. Or, maybe Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Those are pretty bad. So to suggest that the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem was the worst thing that's ever happened. It was the greatest tribulation that mankind has ever experienced or can ever experience. I'd strongly disagree with that. I just think that, certainly that is what preterists would have us believe. But it's funny, preterists, they like to take, Matthew 24 and Luke 21. They kind of pride themselves on taking it kind of literally. And then they come to Revelation. They're like, oh, this is all just allegorical. And I'm like, well, no, I don't think so, man. There's so many details of this coming prince, or this beast, the little horn that's coming, that he's going to be unlike anything the world has ever seen. Um, I really think we have to take those things into consideration. We never saw the mark of the beast in any shape, size, or form at the time of the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. That didn't happen. We didn't see anything like 666. We didn't see a false prophet. There was nobody who was saying, I am God. As much as the Romans had their issues, they did not go into the temple and say, I am God. They didn't do that. Right. So all of that is missing from the record if we're going to suggest that it all was fulfilled in 70 AD. I'm just not at all in the least persuaded by that.
Tim Rawlings, after the fall of Babylon in Revelation chapter 14, verse 13, write this: Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their ergo, which would be work, which would be, I would equate it with good works, which are the Torah type of things. For their deeds, again, it's ergo, follow them. And so I would argue that yeah, there's going to be a whole lot of death at the midpoint. It's going to kick up another notch. There will be martyrdoms earlier mentioned in the fifth seal, but also then there's that midpoint, and I would argue Revelation 14 is kind of that midpoint. And yeah, it's I believe it's the beheading time from that point on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say Revelation 14 is the midpoint, but because there's a lot of things happening in Revelation
Yeah, there's a
14.
lot moving.
There's a lot of stuff happening. And then you actually see the return of Christ in Revelation 14 as well, right? The one who has the sickle in his right hand, he's told to cast it in, for the earth is ripe. And then he goes in and he begins to harvest, and then he begins to squash the grapes. So that certainly is the second coming of Christ. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening. Again, that's why I think we're really we're amiss to suggest that Revelation has to be taken chronologically. I think we it just all falls apart.
It'd be fun if you could, but you can't. Like Revelation 7, it has the flip flop. It has the before with 144,000. Then
Yeah.
about verse 16 for sure, you know that they're coming. The saints are coming out, and they're describing the conditions and things like that. 14
Yeah.
has a little bit of that, and the midpoint picture, and then it moves to the end again. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, and of course, the thing we didn't even talk about are the two witnesses, right? In chapter 11,
right.
that is literally the midpoint of Revelation. And I think that is something that has been just kind of brushed aside by many eschatology teachers, because it's not sexy, it's not exciting. The kind of two guys clothed in sackcloth, and they seem to be a little bit of a nuisance in Jerusalem, but whatever. I think they are the main thing. I think they are the ones who are actually creating some of the lousy scenarios. Why do 1/3 of the trees and the grass all burn up? Well, could it be that they're going to stop it from raining for 3.5 years? I don't know what would happen if it didn't rain for 3.5 years. I don't know, maybe forest fire, right? I mean, maybe we'd have a lot of inflation when it comes to the price of food. Just a wild thought. If you don't have water and then you have things burning up, and then you can't grow your crops, chances are you might have some higher food prices. And I think the two witnesses are the ones who are instigating this. This is a reason why the world hates them so bad. And again, this is why I think you're wrong, Joel. No offense, my friend. But this is why I think when we're looking at Revelation chapter 6, the six seals, the seven seals, whatever, and the four horsemen there, that is an executive summary of the bad things that are coming. So we have inflation. Why? Because the two witnesses stop it from raining, and they're striking the earth with plagues as often as they feel like. That has left devastation in its wake, and the world is just loathing these two individuals, and they can hardly wait for someone to come and save them from these two guys. And guess what? Some guy named the Beast, Antichrist, shows up and he says, I'll take care of those dudes. And he finally kills them. So, and that's another reason why 70 AD could not be the big event. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Everyone quotes Matthew 24 for the end times. Scripture's counterpart is Luke 21:28. when these things begin to happen, stand up and lift your heads because redemption is drawing near. I argue that's why I go out and check out auroras, because it is a sign of the end times. It's a sign of a very unhealthy magnetosphere. And thank you, Bob. I don't know if she's a Barb or he's a Bob. I've never figured out who this person is. Great questions. I mean, every week.
Yep.
So basically, yes, Matthew 24 is similar to Luke 21. The difference is that Luke definitely is set in the coming up to 70 Common Era, and then moves into the end times after that. So there's a big break in Luke 21. There isn't that much of a break in Matthew 24. It's pretty much an end times, Acharith type of a situation.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Revelation looks to be Exodus on steroids. When looking at Isaiah 11:11, it looks like there is a greater second Exodus taking place. Do you see this too? When do you think it takes place? Great question. So yeah, I would definitely agree that it's essentially Exodus on steroids. This is why you have, in my opinion, the two witnesses who are Moses and Elijah. It's not just my opinion. That is what the ancient rabbis thought. And turns out that those two just happen to show up on the Mount of Transfiguration to authenticate Jesus' message and ministry, at least for the three apostles that were up there. And, so I think that is a kind of a prefigure, a precursor of the end times itself, right? So the first coming of Christ, he glorified himself, kind of what he's going to look like when he comes back. And there were Moses and Elijah. That was like a little bit of a preview. Hey, here's the teaser trailer. Check this out, right? And so I think the two witnesses are going to be Moses and Elijah. They're going to do their various miracles or plagues, whatever you want to call them. Plagues. I mean, gosh, who was into plagues? Oh yeah, Moses. That's right. But so was Elijah, right? He did some things that were not so pleasant, right? He stopped it from raining. There's something, right? So these two are going to be the ones that'll be doing these things. And of course, Pharaoh, what did Pharaoh say? Get out of town. I'm not interested. And that's essentially what the world's going to say. We're not interested. But this time, God himself will be coming back. As far as the second Exodus, when I think of the Exodus, I think of the parting of the Red Sea, right? That is really the big event when it comes to the Exodus. And I would suggest that Jesus' feet standing on the Mount of Olives when it splits in two, and then it says, you will flee through my mountain valley. I think that is the second Exodus. I mean, very much on the nose. There it is. And that is when they're going to flee through there. And then Jesus, does all kinds of fighting on their behalf, etc. But I think that is the second Exodus.
Okay. Kodesh calendar, the tribulation is called Jacob's trouble in Jeremiah 37. Who's saved out of it? I would argue, because it's stating Jacob, that it would be all 12 tribes, 13 if you want to declare all 13. And so it has to be Jacob's trouble for all of Jacob's children. And I would argue that if you're part of Jacob, you are part of Israel, and you are, once again, the 12 tribes. That means that you have a belief in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Doug, any comments?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Romans 11 is one of those chapters. You're just like, oh my goodness, this is challenging stuff. It took me a very, very long time to understand this. And I hope I've gotten there. But yeah, so Romans 11, Paul goes on. He talks about, for you, if you were cut out of the wild olive tree, et cetera, et cetera. Brethren, I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, unless you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. Right. And so all Israel will be saved. All right. So I think what happens is we see that Jacob's trouble, well, that would suggest that Jacob's in trouble, right? That kind of makes sense. And we see this in Hosea chapter 5, that you're going to go through this really tough time. All right. Both Israel and Judah are going to go through this really tough time of tzara, the Hebrew word for tribulation. Right. And then in your distress, you're going to call on me, and that's what I'm going to save you. And then we have Romans 11. Now, how I used to read this was that all the Jews are going to be saved, but then it didn't make sense. I'm like, wait, how can every last Jew be saved when it seems to be that God or Satan, right, Gog, is actually after them and he's trying to kill them, right? And then the solution was when I finally understood that all Israel is a reference not to every last individual Jew, but it's a reference to all of Israel. That's what they used to call it before the kingdom was divided, and they called it all Israel. It doesn't mean every individual escapes death, but it means that the two houses come together, and Jesus is going to save all 12 tribes as they represent all Israel. Okay, so individuals are going to die, okay, but all Israel is going to be saved. And so the green olive tree represents, well, all Israel, and so all Israel will be saved, even though individually there'll be a lot of martyrs.
Kodesh calendar again, Galatians 3:29. And if ye be Christ's, then ye are Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise. Sure, I would argue that in this case, there are going to be 10 virgins. 5 will stay asleep and not have any oil. And so I would argue that they're all Abraham's seed, but some don't have oil. So there will be a division at some point in time. And I would argue those are gifts of the Holy Spirit. And so some people are going to not have the oil when you need the oil. So, Doug, any comments on that?
No, I think we got that one.
Okay.
John says, what do you mean by writing the USA is destroyed? I don't know if maybe that's who they were talking amongst themselves. I don't think you and I said that. Let's see here. Let's see here. This is from John. Aren't all 4 horses released? Aren't all 4 horses the release of the Antichrist and the tribulation? The 6th is the return of Yeshua on the day of the Lord. Well, essentially, yes. I think the 4 horses are not so much sequential, but I think that they are all happening. There are 4 different ways to look at the terrible events that are happening. So that's how I would see it. But I know my good friend here sees it differently, and that's okay.
Yeah, I do. I wanted to pop this up real quick. Brent, I see your point. I thought that was the case. And now, after talking to people, I'm saying it's part of the holiness. Torah observance is great. It's part of holiness. And it's a logical conclusion after seeing all of these movements over the last 500 years. But not the oil itself. There's another level above that. There's a Joel 2:28 through 32 that comes above that. Speaking in tongues, possibly, but definitely seeing visions and dreams, things like that, all the things from Joel 2:28. So I would argue, great, Torah observance is great. Most Christians that are involved in holiness are really pretty close to Torah observance. But there is another level above that.
Very cool. Let's see here. Let me see. This is from John. It says, is the sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place? Physics or supernatural? Well, John, what I would suggest is that when the sky recedes like a scroll, this is the same event as, but on a big scale, as when Ezekiel saw the heavens open, when the heavens opened at Jesus' baptism, Stephen's stoning, and then what John sees in Revelation 19, that the heavens are open. I think they're the same thing. Before the fall, God and Adam, right? God and earth were all hanging out together. There was no veil. Now, this is something that even ufologists are talking about. They talk about some cosmic curtain. They talk about a thin psychical dimensional membrane between where the aliens are hanging out and where we are. Okay, so this isn't just Bible speak. This isn't just my idea. This is something that others have seen that are not even invested in the Bible, that there's some kind of membrane, veil, whatever you want to call it, okay, cosmic curtain. There's something between the spiritual domain and our domain. And so when Jesus comes back, that cosmic curtain veil, it's going to go away, and then his domain and our domain become one again. And guess what happens when that happens? Well, we know exactly. When God came down on Mount Sinai, what happened? It started to burn, right? And that's what 1 Peter chapter 3 tells us. 2 Peter chapter 3, excuse me. It says that the heavens will pass away with a great noise and the elements will burn with a fervent heat. Okay, because here comes God. God is fire. God's now touching the earth, Jesus, right? He's touching the earth, and where he touches, where he interacts with it, it begins to burn up, just like it happened on Mount Sinai. So that's where I think you have no longer and let's not call it physical, let's call it terrestrial and, non-terrestrial or celestial. Okay, this is where these two come together, and they clash for a while until Jesus puts it all back together. All
Okay,
right.
let me show this real quick, Doug. Well, pop my screen up, okay? Oh no, here I hit it. Okay, good. All right, so John, here is what NASA is giving us, and this is ESA NASA. This is the South Atlantic anomaly. Now, in the text itself, it doesn't say safer. It says Megillah. I'm taking the Greek to the Hebrew. Megillah is a smaller scroll, so this is not worldwide. This is just one area of the windows of heaven being open. And this is, as of 2020, it's growing. So that's our magnetosphere thinning. This is a physics effect. This is provable, documentable, observable. And there it is. So if you're flying down in South America, you are being exposed to full UV. You're being exposed to full cancer and other things like that. And so that is a truth that I just pulled up on the internet real quick. The South Atlantic anomaly. That is Revelation 6:12 through 17.
I couldn't disagree more there.
Okay,
Joel,
we'll
I,
see.
I
We'll
don't
see,
I
Doug.
don't think you've proven your thesis at all.
Oh,
I think you're just asserting things. You're asserting that the windows of heaven must be the magnetosphere, but I don't know where. Like, you haven't convinced me in any way, shape, or form
that's
that
fine. It'll
one has to
happen,
equal the other.
and you people will notice it, and you'll
Well,
start to
yeah, but
notice.
you were also a couple weeks ago. You were basing your big thesis on a 15-year-old boy that had an NDE and some woman who had a dream. I don't
The
know.
auroras that we're seeing, Doug, are proof that this
I don't
stuff
know.
is
I
happening.
don't know. All right. All right. Well, guys, we're out of time. Thank you for your questions. They were fantastic. Joel, thank you for a
All right,
spirited
there you go.
conversation. I
All
love
right.
it. Not always agreeing is what makes it fun. All right. And I will agree with you that we do have to wait and see how it all pans out.
Oh yeah.
The bummer, I guess, is that we're not going to really care by the time we get there. I doubt that we'll even care. Well, who was Doug right or was Joel right? Man, we're not going to be thinking about that stuff. And all these questions I think I'm going to ask God when I get to the other side. I think I won't even care. I'll be like, you know what? Who cares? It's so wonderful here. I just love being in God's presence and feeling his love. I don't care about all that stuff anymore. So I don't know. I guess, it's fun to have these conversations, but let's remember to do the most important thing. Love God and love people, right? That is what God wants us to do. And if we get those things right, then we can squabble about some of these little details, and that's fine. And hey, when the Lord comes back, we'll get to see how it all works out. And there you go. And maybe I'm just wrong on everything. That's okay. So, Joel, again, thank you. This was fun. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And again, if you thought about Regenesis Code, please pray about it. Get involved. If you have any of those skills that I mentioned, do check that out. I put it all in the description as well. So check it out. If you haven't listened to the story yet, go for it. I think you might really enjoy it. All right.
We're
Well,
going to
thank
have
you.
Daniel Sanders next week.
Daniel
So,
Sanders. Nice.
great guest. You're going to love him. He's a Messianic pastor from Oklahoma. Please join us next week. You'll love Daniel Sanders.
All right. Okay. God bless you guys.